All right, everybody, welcome to my favorite show I do. I think it's called The Slate, but we're going to call it whatever we want. We're going to be talking baseball up until 6 o'clock, just about 6 o'clock, with a very special guest. It's a Matt, right? But it's not Matt LaMarca. Matt LaMarca is at Citi Field watching his Mets play on opening day. I think he's with his dad too. He tweeted this out. I'm not giving out confidential information. This is public information, but he went with his family to go watch the Mets. So he said, you know what? We don't want you to rush back for the show. We're going to bring in Matt Meiselman instead. And quite frankly, I think Matt's actually a lot smarter than Matt LaMarca. So this actually ends up being a plus. So we're going to talk some DFS for tonight, for Friday night, answer any questions you have, talk a little sports betting as well for the next 40 minutes or so. So buckle up. It's going to get crazy. I promise you that. But Matt, first and foremost, let's get the pleasantries out of the way. How are you doing on this Friday evening?
I'm pretty good. Appreciate the kind words. And I was just checking on that Mets game. They were up 10-1 going into the ninth and held on to win 10-3. So it got a little contentious there, it seems. But after all the stress, the Mets have closed it out. So good for them. They've had we were talking about a little before we jumped on here. The Mets have had a strong start. But overall, it seems like nothing really notable has happened yet in the MLB. We'll see about Byron Buxton. I'm just already sad about that. That's definitely the worst part of my day today was Byron Buxton. So I don't really know what else to say about that, but every single team in the MLB has at least 2 losses. We've got the basement teams are hovering around 500. Obviously hasn't been that many games. So Buxton seems like the first thing that can really change the tide as far as futures outlook, things like that. It's just unfortunate because I thought he was a dark horse MVP candidate. And now,
I'm with you.
I don't know what's going to happen.
I took him at 20-1 to win the MVP, knowing it's most likely not going to cash, not because of the talent, but because that's why I took it at 20-1, but because Buxton can't stay on the field. And supposedly the rumor that's going around the Twitter world is that as he was walking off the field, he told the trainer, "I heard it pop." That's what he said. Anything that pops that's not popcorn is never a good sign. So you never want to hear that when it comes to your body or anything like that. But we're not going to get, all worried just yet. I was frustrated already because I do really want that 20-1 ticket to cash. That'd be great. But Buxton coming out of the game this afternoon, Red Sox home opener, sliding into second base, didn't look bad by any means, but just kind of came up lame and he had to be helped off the field. So there's that with Buxton, business as usual. But we're going to talk about the 11-game slate here tonight. I love these Friday slates. I think that's why I'm on the slate on Friday. That is the name of the show. Did confirm that. But I love these huge slates. Matt LaMarca is actually somebody who likes the smaller slates a little bit better. I like when my choices are vast and the seas are just so deep I can go anywhere, right? So you're looking at the pitching matchups for tonight. For an 11-game slate, Matt, I would say that this field is kind of weak. When Marcus Strowman is at Coors Field, he's 9K. He's a guy that doesn't strike out a batter an inning. He's a career 7.4 K9, I think it is. When he's one of the most expensive guys, I usually get a little bit shy here and I go, well, the options can't be that great overall if Strowman in Coors Field is one of the more expensive options. What's your overall take on the pitching options that we can look at for tonight?
Yeah, it's an interesting slate. I'm kind of just scanning initially to see if there's a leverage spot or someone who I think is dramatically over or under owned. I think we had that yesterday. Luis Severino was my favorite pitcher on the slate. Unfortunately, I just went full Yankees homer and played him with a bunch of Yankee stacks. So didn't matter how good Severino was. The Yankees barely did anything offensively. The runs they did get were from their 2 worst hitters. So
right.
I don't see anything that really jumps out as super exciting, but I guess the starting point has to be, do you play Carlos Rodon at what should be very, very high ownership? There are a couple other pitchers that are in pretty good spots. I don't really love where Dylan Cease is at for his matchup against the Rays. They've struggled a little offensively. I think he's fine. But I don't know that anyone jumps off the page. I guess, really the first consideration is, do you play Rodon in tournaments? I think cash games, you certainly play him. Yeah. And then if you're not playing him, are the Indians on the other side of the game good enough to stack? And I think I'm less excited about this slate than I might otherwise be because, no, I don't really think this is that great of a spot for the Indians. I wish, my favorite kind of slate, regardless of size, is where there's a chalk pitcher who is blow up prone, and the offense he's facing may have some strikeouts in the lineup, but at least there's upside for power, and maybe they can knock the guy out of the game early, get to the bullpen, all of that. I don't really see any situations like that. So yeah, I'll just kind of leave it there. Like, I think you can play Rodon, but you probably want to mix him with more contrarian offense. I'm okay with not playing him. I think that, like, pitching is medium, right? Do you see it the same way, where it's just there's a bunch of fine options, no one's amazing?
Totally. And here's the interesting thing too. We're talking about Rodon against, in the very early stages, the best scoring team in Major League Baseball.
I do have to make an amendment right before you finish this. I already have called them the Indians instead of the Guardians, so we're gonna have to. I don't know. I don't know how many times I'm gonna do that during this show, but check one. We're 0 for 1 on getting the team name right.
I mean, to be fair, I did that already. I did that on MLB Network. So, I think it's okay to do it here. Probably not good to do that on MLB Network when I did that on opening day, by the way. So that was a great start to the season. The Cleveland Guardians are the highest scoring team in the league right now. 45 runs scored. Followed by, who the team in second place is?
Is it Oakland?
Yep, it is Oakland. Just like everybody drew it up. The only two teams, not including the game so far today, that have scored over 40 runs in MLB right now. This Cleveland Guardians, see, now you've got that word in my head. We're not
going to mess it up anymore now.
The Cleveland Guardians have statistically been one of the best offenses in the league thus far. Very early, so obviously take these numbers with a grain of salt. 161 WRC plus, only striking out 19% of the time so far, and a really good 216 isolated power as a team overall. That's not supposed to happen. But here comes the weird part. Because of this early abundance of offense, it kind of has me a little bit on Rodon. We're on a normal basis where everything is normal. See, I did it. The Guardians are hitting like the team that they're supposed to be, which is mediocre. Rodon's an instant easy. But the Guardians are hitting so well right now that I kind of pause a little bit. If this game was in San Francisco, fine. But it's in Cleveland. That doesn't help either. So does that change how you look at Rodon tonight? Because when I was looking at this slate this morning, I was like, oh, good, Rodon against the Guardians. But then I'm like, Guardians are hitting really well right now. Like, that would be like the tournament play to me right now is stacking the Guardians against Rodon. And I don't want to do that. But like, that kind of seems like the play at this point. Yeah,
well, aside from the Indians Guardians thing, like, the other thing I'm stuck on from previous years that we don't have anymore is this is a National League game, but there's no pitcher batting. Like, my mind is first going to like, oh, they're going to lose the DH because it's the National League. We have to remember that's not true either. So yeah, I think the spot for Rodon is like, it's marginally more worrisome to me because he's facing an offense that has played well lately. It's not really that consideration that I'm weighing that heavily as far as like whether or not to play him. It's more that I just think his ownership will be really, really high. And there are a lot of other competent pitchers, a lot of whom are cheaper. Like, Rodon is $9,800. I think you have a lot of upside in someone like Tariq Skubal, who's $1,500 less, $1,600 less. I think Skubal is super volatile, and his innings are like, he could strike out 9 in 4 innings. Like, Skubal has the strikeout stuff. Like, I don't expect him to go deep in the game, but that doesn't mean the upside's not there. He's facing the Royals. Like, there can be a lot of strikeouts in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Montgomery facing the Orioles. Like, I think there's upside there despite maybe similar pitch count concerns. But I would say for sure Rodon has more upside. It's just he's not the only pitcher with upside, and some of these guys are cheaper than he is. But I just don't think there's enough overall just raw run scoring potential from Cleveland. Just a lot of it has to do with the park in San Francisco. Like, it's not that great of a hitter's park. So to me, just like pivoting over to offense, I think the field is essentially going to focus on 3 teams that are facing 3 bad pitchers or pitching staffs, like bullpen-ish games. The Yankees in Baltimore, the Angels in Texas, and the Dodgers at home against the Reds. And I think all those, like, if you're pairing one of those stacks with Rodon and you're playing a tournament, you're just running into so many other similar lineups. So I would say those are all fine choices. If you're playing one of those, you probably want different pitchers just to be a little different. If you are playing Rodon or you just want to go way off the board, I actually think the most interesting team to talk about tonight is the Cubs against German Marquez. because normally you get a Coors team visiting Colorado where everyone plays them. And one, the Cubs aren't that good, so maybe people are off it because of that. Two, Marquez just had a dominant game against the Dodgers in his last start. And that may be scaring people from stacking against him too. And then also the Cubs are like basically in the same price tier as the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Angels. I think they go way overlooked. So that's probably my favorite offense tonight. I think it's rare that we get a Coors team that people are not that interested in, but the Cubs have tons of upside. Like if they happen to knock Marquez out early, it's Coors Field. Like any offense can score 16 runs. We see all sorts of weird things there. And even though it's like not summer weather, you still can get that. So yeah, if I have to pick a stack that I like, I think the Cubs are at the top for me right now.
And the interesting thing is that the pricing is not Coors Field pricing. Yeah. Like I have both lineups here right now. You don't have a hitter that's over 4,700. And that hitter is Frank Schwindel. And I'm like, why is he the most expensive guy out of both teams? It's really weird. So you can jam in a Coors Field stack and it's not going to cost you the premium you're used to. Like it used to be, like even dating back to last year, if you were getting a Coors Field stack, you're paying at the minimum for at least the top four, 4 or 5 guys, 4,500, 4,600, 5K. You're not getting that here at all. And it's not like there's some bad matchups here as well, because like you mentioned, Marquez, who ironically, which seemed like it happened with all the Rocky starters last year, they pitched better at Coors than they did on the road. Like Coors was like their spot last year. Marquez was one of them. Now I know Marquez had a really bad second half last year. He was just bad overall. But you bring up the point about his last start. And then you got Strowman, who is just a ground ball machine. Does not give up fly balls, does not give up home runs, doesn't have that strikeout upside though. So I don't like him at 9K. There's just not enough upside there at 9K. But you look at these lineups here, and it's crazy how easy it is to stack. Even if you're doing like a mini stack of the heart of the lineups here, it's so easy to do that tonight. So I think it brings in a really interesting dynamic because like I mentioned, on a normal basis, you're paying a premium for these guys that you wouldn't even be paying a premium for. Like Diaz over on the Rockies on a normal basis, like he's even approaching 4K. He never gets 4K on the road, but 3,400 tonight. Like it's really interesting how the algorithm kind of just worked its way out and everybody is cheap.
Yeah, that's the reason though that I'm kind of preferring the Cubs side to the Rockies side, because it is easier to stack the Rockies, which I think has to mean more people do it. So I think there are ways to stack it that are good. Like I think there's ways to stack any of these teams that are viable. Like the slate is really spread out. There's 11 games. There's no one single or even two really obvious chalk teams. So you could sort of make a case for anyone that's in a good spot. And the Rockies are certainly one of those teams. I think the way you would want to play, or I guess the best reason to want to play the Rockies is if you really like Dylan Cease and Freddie Peralta tonight, and you want to pay up for pitching, and then you need a cheaper stack. Because I think if you're playing Rodon, it's just too chalky to play the Rockies with Rodon. That combination I think will be somewhat popular. But if you're like, I'm fading Rodon, I'm going to go with Cease and Peralta, I'll pay for those guys instead. Colorado fits perfectly in that lineup. I think like that's a good way to approach a tournament with them. So I think in a vacuum, I prefer the Cubs, but I do like both sides of this game. Like people are going to play Yankees. Like this is it's a weird phenomenon how when the best player on a team is out, you often see more ownership because it's easier to fit them. And with no Aaron Judge, you don't have to worry like, oh, can I play Judge and Stanton and Gallo, like, and Hicks? You can't play all of them. Now there's only 3 choices. It sets up easier. This is still Jordan Lyles at Camden Yards. Like
Lord.
So I think the fact that Judge is not playing could actually mean that more people play the Yankees because they're more affordable. I think Judge was probably their highest priced player. So now it's just pretty easy to fit them.
Can you just imagine this scenario too? You're Jordan Lyles. Okay. You absolutely suck. You just were playing in Texas. Right. You were just playing in Texas for 2 years and you were almost averaging 2 home runs per 9 inning. And then you land in Baltimore, even after those numbers. What do you think is going to happen to Jordan Lyles as an Oriole pitcher? If you can't even keep the ball in the park in Texas, you think you're going to keep the ball in the park in Baltimore? I know they did like all the funky things with the wall, and maybe that's where he's like, oh, maybe I got a better chance now. Camden Yards is still a hitter-friendly ballpark, whether you want to admit it or not. So shout out to Jordan Lyles for like taking this leap of faith because it's not going to work out. And now he's facing a Yankees team who, even without Aaron Judge, have a team total of 5.5 tonight. That lineup that they have without Aaron Judge, I actually love this lineup. Rizzo leading off, totally for it. Stanton, number 2, love that. Then Donaldson, who is not a leadoff hitter, and I don't know why they were batting him leadoff. And then Gallo, which is, strikeout. LeMahieu, Torres, Hicks, Connor Falefa, and then Higashioshi at the bottom. I love that lineup tonight. I think there's a lot of ways that you can stack that lineup because there's a lot of good. It's very well balanced. Whereas when they're running it with Donaldson at the top, I don't like how it flows. It just seems odd. But this lineup I love this. I love the way this is set up. And this has actually, it was funny when I found out Judge was out. I'm like, oh, that's a huge bummer. I love Judge tonight. But then when I saw the lineup, I'm like, this makes sense. This is a good lineup, except for Gallo at cleanup.
Yeah, I think that's actually the most important point here is the Gallo at cleanup, because Gallo probably will be the highest owned of the players in this lineup because of his price at 4,200. And it's a hard thing where sometimes you just don't want to play the chalk stack because the whole thing is really popular and there's just no way to stack it where it's not the same as everybody else. And then other times, like the Angels, I think, are this example tonight where it's just Trout and Ohtani are the chalk. And then the other players are all pretty contrarian, but those players are all bad. So like, Anthony Rendon's good, but the rest of them, they're all bad. So like, you wouldn't make an Angels stack that doesn't include Trout, Ohtani, and Rendon and just use the other 5 or 6 Angels hitters. That just almost makes no sense. But with the Yankees, it's really easy to imagine a scenario where the team scores 11 runs and Gallo goes like 0-for-4 with 4 strikeouts. Like that certainly can happen because he's so boom or bust. Like he could get up with 2 guys on, 2 outs every time and not get them in.
Let me ask you about the other side of this game with the Orioles. One thing that I have found myself doing from a sports betting side is I almost always take over 3.5 runs for the Orioles when they're going against a lefty. Like I try to preach this as much as possible, but obviously I can't reach everybody. So everybody's not on board. But the Orioles are a good hitting team against lefties. Like they always give lefties issues. Now, I hate that they always have Mullins leading off against a lefty. I don't like the left on left to start, but whatever. That's here nor there. The way they've constructed this lineup tonight is not usually how they do it against lefties. Like you usually actually see Austin Hayes batting cleanup. You'd have Mancini batting third, and then Mountcastle is batting second. I don't know why they have Urias up at second tonight, but if you look at this team overall against lefties last year, and they basically have the same exact team, if anything, they actually probably improved those lefty numbers with Robinson Chirinos, but he's batting 8th. But if you look at this number for Baltimore last year against lefties, 111 WRC plus, 198 isolated power, 335 WOBA, like those aren't bad numbers. And if I just told you those team numbers and said, hey, guess the team against lefties, you probably wouldn't be like, oh, Orioles. Like those are pretty good numbers. Those numbers were all within the top 10 of Major League Baseball against lefties last year. So how do you feel about the lefties going against Montgomery, who we do know I believe he's on a pitch count tonight. So there is some of that limited, time to get him, but at least the ownership is not going to be there at all.
Yeah, I think it's hard. There's a lot of moving parts to this game. Montgomery's pitch limit is hugely relevant because the less he pitches, the less you like this. The Yankees bullpen is really good. They had to use the bullpen pretty heavily last night, but I don't think Chad Green even pitched. I think it was like Chapman just threw 16 straight balls and came out of the game. It was basically his night. But like the other guys, maybe the bullpen is a little tired, but not too tired. We don't know how long Montgomery is staying in the game, but I feel like Jordan Montgomery. So I would agree with the premise in general, but I do find that Jordan Montgomery tends to be undervalued a bit.
Sure.
Like I think a lot of it stems from 2-3 years ago when his ERA was like above 5 and his peripherals suggested he was better than that. And then last year he was a sub-4 ERA pitcher for a full season, but he started this year with a bad outing. So I don't know, like it seems like he doesn't get enough respect. Maybe the fact that he pitches in Yankee Stadium inflates his ERA and people don't realize that. But so if this were a normal lefty where people had no feelings about the lefty starter, I would say, sure, like the Orioles are probably undervalued against this guy because they have good platoon advantage. The combination of Montgomery himself being undervalued and then also him not being in the game that long and it being a good bullpen has me a little worried about this team.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest concern is the lineup. Where what are the Orioles doing? Why is Austin Hayes so far down? He may only get 2 plate appearances against Montgomery instead of 3. And Ramon Urias in front of Mancini Mountcastle. It makes no sense. So I think I'd agree with you fully if they had a better lineup.
Right.
With this lineup, I probably partially agree with you. And I am interested in Montgomery for DFS because I think no one's going to play him. Like that's really the main reason. I think he can have 5 really strong innings, get out of there, get a win. The Yankees should have a lead. Like I think he's pretty compelling for DFS. And you're getting, I think it's not so much of a discount off the top guys that people will just, say this is a cheap value guy at 8,800, but he's like, it's a value, but it's not too much where everyone will do it. That's kind of what I'm saying there. So I think he's a pretty good option at 8,800, even though the Orioles could hit a couple home runs off him and it could end up pretty bad for the Yankees.
One guy I do want to bring up tonight, one of the storylines that's going on is with the Padres going up against the Braves. They're bringing up one of their top prospects in Mackenzie Gore is going to be making his major league debut. Did already make 1 start in AAA before he did come up. 5 innings in that one, did not give up really anything in that, and ended up striking. He faced 16 batters, gave up 2 hits, and ended up striking out 7. Gore has been somebody that they have loved in that minor league system, has tremendous strikeout upside. We've seen that at all levels of the minors that he's been through. The walks can be an issue though. And he's got a tough matchup against the Braves. The Braves haven't been hitting overall, but in the limited time they have been hitting, they've been scoring in bunches. And that's kind of been the story of them so far. We saw it a couple of days ago. They put up like 15 runs against the Nationals. And then the next morning turned around, faced Josiah Gray, who hasn't thrown a good game in the majors at all and looked like a dominant pitcher against the Braves. Maybe it's a little bit of a hangover from the night before, but this Braves team has been so inconsistent and none of these guys have really started to get it going. And this kind of is the effects of the shortened spring training. Any interest in taking a shot with Gore tonight? Because he's one of the cheapest pitchers on the board at 5,000. We know the strikeouts upside is up there. He's a lefty, which does worry me a bit against the Braves. But do you have any thoughts on Gore going for the Padres tonight?
All right, I think this is going to be my last wishy-washy take because I do have some more concrete things to say. When it comes,
we'll get to that right after this.
We're going to get to the hot takes. This will be like a lukewarm take. I think he's fine. $5,000 is more than cheap enough to take a real chance on someone who, he could blow up because just lack of experience. I think that the price is too low. Yeah, I think you could actually justify playing him in cash games. It's not that much risk. But I think the field knows that this is a guy with a lot of strikeout upside, despite the difficult matchup. They'll play him too. If you make 100 lineups and you put Gore in 25 of them, I think you're basically going to mirror what everyone else is doing. So it's really hard to say anything too definitive about this. I think you play an expensive stack and he fits. He's fine. I think he should do pretty well. He probably won't be in the game that long. It kind of sounded like you were on the same page there, where if you need the savings, he's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay. You steer now. You tell me where to go, and we will go there. So you drive it right now.
You're going to hate this, but I think the Oakland A's are a good bet again.
Oh. a good bet tonight for on sports. Okay,
A's money line. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
They're
this is Ross Stripling.
Yeah.
Ross Stripling.
Well, okay. I think it's more than just Ross Stripling, who I would usually pick on anyway. The Blue Jays lineup, I don't think is actually that good. Last year, and I even caught myself doing this earlier this season. Last year, I would have thought they arguably had the best offense in baseball.
Yep.
This year, I think I even said on one of our shows that they have the best offense in baseball. I'm going to backtrack a little just because I think the bottom hitters are a little bit weaker than maybe what I perceived early. But what this more of what this comes down to is Teoscar Hernandez is hurt and Alejandro Kirk is not in the lineup. And I don't think the Blue Jays are deep. The top end of their lineup is unbelievable. And Vlad's probably the best hitter in the MLB, or at least the American League. But there's not a lot of depth to the lineup and they're missing some key guys. So I don't think this is an amazing offense right now. I think it's a good offense. And I think it's a top-heavy offense. And I think you could see them kind of stall out when it gets to the bottom half of their batting order. So it's just like it's a little too much respect. Like I almost know nothing about Dalton Jeffries, and I've seen Ross Stripling pitch for a long time. Like he's probably mediocre, and the A's offense is not good either. But plus 170 is, I think it's capitalizing more on just like how not that potent the bottom of the Blue Jays lineup is. That's kind of what I'm thinking there.
So it's actually funny. I did notice that last night, and the way I noticed it is that they had the bases loaded against the Yankees last night, and they showed every guy that was on base, and it was Kevin Biggio, Santiago Espinal, and Bradley Zimmer.
Right.
And I saw all three names, and I was like, "What?
Right.
This is the
Last year's Blue Jays would have started one of those people, right? Last year's Blue Jays, one of those guys cracks the lineup. This year, they have all three of them in the lineup.
And it's funny because their lineup is definitely like a lot better. But when I saw those three names, I was like, what are we talking about here? I thought the Blue Jays were stacked. That's who's on base right now. Like granted, they're all on base. They're doing what they can. But it was funny to see those three guys on base. Granted, George Springer was up, so that's where it all starts again. But it was funny to see all three of those guys on base. And I was like, that ain't the Blue Jays lineup. That's not this powerhouse that everybody talks about. And
it's worse tonight because Kirk is good. Like I think Alejandro Kirk is a legitimate hitting catcher. And tonight their 6 through 9 in the lineup is Raimel Tapia, Santiago Espinal, who you mentioned, Zach Collins, who's playing for Kirk, and then Biggio batting ninth. Like that is not a good back. Like people are talking about how the Yankees have no depth this year because like Jose Trevino or Higashioka and Kiner Falefa. And I agree, like that's not a good way to end their lineup compared to last year. Blue Jays have the same problem. And specifically because I think Teoscar Hernandez is, I don't know if he's better than George Springer, but he's a really important piece of that lineup and he's on the IL now. So that's really, I think almost all of the value is coming from the fact that Hernandez is hurt right now.
And especially with Hernandez losing a huge bat against left-handed pitching, he's got massive numbers against lefties every year. So that is something that is big there too. If there was anything I was going to take tonight, it's funny, like, even though there's so many games, there's not a lot of stuff I'm like, oh, I definitely got to take that or whatnot. Like, it's kind of one of those weird, like, it's a big slate, but there's not a lot of like groundbreaking things that I liked. I do like taking the Dodgers team total to go over 5.5 against the Reds, especially Vladimir Gutierrez. Like, he's got great stuff. Can't keep it together at all. His command can go south so fast. And if that is an issue, and then you're going up against this type of lineup, like you're just asking for trouble coming fast. Because a lot of these guys haven't really come around so far offensively. It feels like Freddie Freeman got like his first big hit last night in the 8th inning when they started chanting his name and all that. He's finally started to come around. But 5.5 is always a number that you're always like on the fence about. I think they go over this easy against the Reds, against Gutierrez and that bullpen, which is just absolutely atrocious. So getting close to even money on this, minus 105. I like that play for the Dodgers tonight.
Yeah, I actually think you can take the just total game over for this, but it's contingent on an update that we don't have yet. So I think Tony Gonsolin is kind of in the same boat as Jordan Montgomery, where like he's probably not going to pitch that long. I don't think he's great, but he's fine. And if the bullpen comes in early, like that's not good for the other team. But we don't know yet if Tommy Pham is playing. He missed last night's game. And I think would you say he's the Reds' best hitter now? Like I think there's maybe Jonathan India, but I think it's probably Pham.
Well, India's hurt too. I think he's out tonight.
So we're waiting on that also. I don't know if we got that lineup yet, but okay, if he got hurt last night. So the total opened at 10, it's now 9.
Right.
If the Reds get their full lineup healthy, like maybe that's not actually possible. And maybe I just missed the news, but if we see a Reds lineup that has India and Pham in it, the total probably would bounce back up to 9.5, if not more. So I definitely get what you're saying about the Dodgers side. I like offense there for them, but I like it for the Reds too if they're healthy. It's just a big if right now because it seems like, potentially their 2 best guys are not in the lineup.
Yeah, just check. There's still nothing out on the Reds yet. They're still waiting on that. So I'm not surprised by that because of Pham and India. I think the idea was India would miss tonight and he would go on Saturday, but Pham is a true kind of question mark on that. Give me something else you like tonight, whether it's DFS side or sportsbook side, anything you got that you want to just kind of throw out there.
Yeah, well, I was interested in the red stack because I think literally no one will play it, but without those players in, you just like it's going to look so much worse when Tyler Naquin is like the most threatening hitter in your lineup. It just is going to ruin the whole thing. So I would pay attention to the Reds as far as stacking and for the over if they're healthy, but otherwise, yeah, I don't think you can do it. I'm going back to like the wishy-washy thing again, but
that's fine.
I think it kind of needs to be said where Dylan Cease is potentially the best contrarian option for DFS. So back to wishy-washy DFS specifically. But
you think he's contrarian tonight?
I think this is what I'm unsure of.
Okay.
I'm not sure if people will be scared off of Rodon for the way that the way the Guardians have played. And I'm not sure if they may pivot because they think he's the chalk and then he ends up lower than he should be. And any non-ownership on Rodon is more for Cease.
Sure.
Like that's going to be pretty direct. They're in the same price range. The Rays offense has struggled a bit. And if you told me that Cease was going to be 40% instead of Rodon, the Rays are my favorite stack. Like I think there's enough offensive potential. Cease is a really good strikeout pitcher, but I think the home run variance is there for him. Like you can hit the long ball off of him. And I don't think he's that good. He just has a lot of strikeout potential in his game. So if we knew he was chalk, I would love Tampa. I like maybe you have a better feel for this than I do. I don't have a sense of what the field is doing here. Maybe he just comes in medium owned and all of this is moot and there's nothing exciting. But if you think everyone's playing Cease, I think Tampa has plenty of upside to go there and no one's going to stack the Rays.
So to me, it feels like Cease might, I think Rodon is going to be the most popular play because I think people are just going to take the Guardians thing, throw it out. You play Rodon, especially after the first outing he had, which was against the, who was it the first? Oh, the Marlins. 5 innings, 12 strikeouts. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like that's absolutely insane. You can't have a better debut for your team there. I think it's Rodon. Then I think Cease is after that. The thing with Tampa is scoring, but it's kind of like the Braves. They're scoring in like bunches. And then the other half is they just look absolutely atrocious. Like Wander Franco, I've watched a lot of him already this season. I don't think he has taken a first pitch at all this season. He is out there and he's swinging at the first pitch every single time. And he keeps putting himself behind in these counts. And he's been an easy out. It seems like so far because he's just swinging out of his shoes to start the year. It's odd because he wasn't like that last year, but I don't think I've seen him take a first pitch yet. And I feel like I've watched a healthy amount of the Rays games so far. And then the lineup is just not great. Every time I look at this lineup, I'm like, how are they winning games? Like this is what they're rolling out here tonight. Like Brandon Lau is leading off, then Franco, Rosarania, fine, Choi, and then Diaz, Lau, Josh, is it Josh Lowe and then Brandon Lau? I always mix them up. Whatever. L-O-W-E. That's
Josh and Nate are related, and Brandon, I think, but I don't know how you say it. Doesn't answer your question.
Here's the thing. Lowe is batting first and sixth. Okay, you pronounce it however you want. And then Margot Kiermaier, who's like an instant out. You know, like the lineup. Like I look at it, I'm like, this lineup stinks. But they keep scoring. Yeah. But there's a lot of strikeout potential in that lineup, and that's kind of where I got from Cease, because there's a lot of guys that are going to swing and miss in this one. Like Diaz is one of them. Rosarania is going to strike out a lot too. So that's where I was on Cease. So I think I go Cease, Rodon, Cease, and then maybe Peralta. But like St. Louis has been another team that's just been on fire offensively. And they don't strike out at all.
St. Louis is disproportionately bad versus righties, or at least they should be. The whole lineup's right-handed. So, but Peralta, I think I'm getting this right, had the bad start against the Cubs last time out.
Yes, he did. Yes.
So there's a lot of weirdness. Like one of the things that's been interesting over the last few years of DFS is people seem to care about different things in different years. Like it's been shifting over time, where if we were talking 5 years ago, all anyone cares about is how the guy has been the last 3 times out. The recent performance is massive. And now there's so much widely available in terms of like projections and optimizers and all of that. People like build their lineups more artificially, that the recent performance doesn't seem to factor in as much as it would have in the past. And that'll vary based on what contest you're playing in too. So it's just like I'm in a wait and see approach kind of just on this season overall.
Yeah, you have to.
But I think, yeah, it kind of depends the way you see it unfolding. Like Peralta should be the better play in terms of the way he projects. Like if you don't care about recent performance, the Cardinals offense is not that good. Freddie Peralta, it's a right-handed pitcher, huge strikeout potential. He's the play over Cease. But if you go by recency bias, then maybe Cease is the guy that people play. Either way, though, Rodon will be above them. So that's not really, I totally agree there. It's just kind of a quirky slate. But I think the thing I am sure of is that people don't want to play Jordan Montgomery. All of those choices will be more popular than him. So I think Montgomery could be my favorite pitcher. But the last point on the Rays, like, even though the lineup is not that good, the positional value you get from them, where their two best fantasy hitters are in the middle infield, that frees you up to play outfielders and first baseman and third baseman elsewhere. So if you believe that Wander Franco can actually like start having a reasonable approach at the plate, and Brandon Lau can do, like, he's played fine. So I think that's what's the two main reasons to stack Tampa are if you think Cease is popular, and then also you're getting your value out of the middle infield, and then you could, throw in some Coors or Yankees outfielders around it.
2 9K guys that I'm absolutely not playing tonight. Marco Gonzalez against Houston. Never want to do lefty against Houston. Houston doesn't strike out, and then they're just so good against lefties. I don't even want to screw with that, especially at 9,300. And then I mentioned earlier, Marcus Strowman at the Rockies, not a strikeout guy. 9K is way too expensive for Marcus Strowman. He'll get outs, but he's not going to get you strikeouts, so that's not going to get you fantasy points. It's kind of like Zach Greinke. When I see anytime Zach Greinke is above like 6K, I'm like, that's the worst pricing I've ever seen in my life. Zach Greinke is going to get you one strikeout, and then he's going to go, give up 5 home runs because he stinks. I once had an autocorrect where I typed in Greinke and the autocorrect literally below it said horrible. And I screenshotted that and I kept it because it's so true. And I have photo proof that I'll show on the show one day, but it's true. Greinke's horrible. Great story. He's with the Royals. I think he stinks, but he and Strowman are like the same for me. There's no strikeout. So I don't know why I'm ever playing that. We have just a couple minutes left. Any closing thoughts, anything you want to just hit on real quick before we get out of here and start enjoying our Fridays?
Yeah, so I'll just mention one more team we haven't talked about yet. And I would have been very excited both to bet on them, to stack them, everything. And that's the Phillies, who have not hit that well this year.
Not at all.
But they, like, you look at that lineup when it's normal. So this is the thing. JT Realmuto and Gene Segura are not in the lineup tonight. So that kind of ruins a lot of the excitement there. But Castellanos and Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, the guys I just mentioned, Didi Gregorius, like, we should start seeing the Phillies pop in bad matchups. Like, Pablo Lopez in Miami is not where you want to stack a team normally. Right. But I think getting the Phillies when they're low owned because of the power potential is going to be very enticing in the future, like anytime after today, because they're running out a pretty weak lineup today. So I was just really disappointed to see Realmuto's not playing specifically, because now it doesn't, I think you can still take a shot, but maybe tomorrow, like, this will be advice through the weekend. You're going to get the Phillies low owned because Miami is one of the best pitchers parks in the MLB. But if you just look at the power hitters that this team has, they can hit the ball over any fence. And I think seeing a double-digit run performance in Marlins Park, if it's going to come from anyone, I think Phillies are one of the teams best positioned to do it.
I will say, though, I do think the Marlins have the most underrated rotation in all of baseball. Rogers, Alcantara, and Lopez. Like,
I love Pablo Lopez. I totally agree.
In the coming years, all 3 of those guys are going to be in Cy Young talks for years to come. And then that's not even mentioning Sixto Sanchez, who was on the IL until the middle of the year. He's also in that lineup. That rotation is going to, it's a 4-letter word that is often used on Twitter, but that's what that rotation is going to do for the next few years, which means the Marlins are going to ship them off. So the rest of Major League Baseball will benefit at some point, because those guys are going to be on other teams. Speaking of things that are going to be in other places, I am going to be leaving this show. Matt's going to be leaving the show because we're out of time. But I will tell you, there are Madden games coming up. I have no idea what they are because our producer didn't even let me know. So let me know. So I'll tell you this. There are Madden games coming up tonight. You can enter them and you can watch them right here on the DraftKings YouTube page. Trust me on that. They're coming. You know what else is coming? The close to the show. Goodbye.